Professor Dholakia, Professor Chaturvedi, members of faculty of IMI and friends. It's a very hard act to follow to come after someone like Professor Dholakia, and I was really fascinated just listening to him. I wish I'd gotten a chance to attend some of his lectures when I was a student. Unfortunately, that was not to be. Uh, he focused, I think some of the things that Professor Dholakia was really ringing bells in my head, and I could see a lot of people sitting in the front rows also nodding in vigorous agreement, because I think one of the things that he talked about is that who is it that's going to go and market to the Indian rural public, or it is going to be us, right? And I represent industry, retail, which has to be hyper local by definition. So in our case, every store actually has to adapt to its immediate catchment. Okay, and this is one of the things that, for example, I love to quote an example of two stores that we used to have exactly 2.5 kilometers apart. One was for those of you who know Bombay, there was a store at Bombay Central, and there was another store at Lower Parel, and they are 2.5 kilometers apart. The only difference was that the Bombay Central store was in the heart of a very conservative Muslim catchment area called Nagpada, and the Lower Parel store was in the midst of a very cosmopolitan Bombay, because it was inside office complexes, and those two stores could have been in two different worlds, because you could go in, all the processes were the same, but the kind of merchandise you saw there, the way the merchandise was arranged, it was completely different, because it was catering to two very different mindsets, two very different kinds of customers. And this is the kind of innovation that one has to adapt to as you move on. From the theme, I think I love the way Professor Chaturvedi first talked about the theme, and the way Professor Dholakia really focused on the innovation aspect of it. And I think he said a lot about innovation and those are really valuable words. I think all of you are fortunate. You should hang on to every word that he said, because they're very, very crucial and important words of a very experienced man. I would like to focus a little more on the other word, which is sustenance, because the theme I was referring to was, you talked about sustainable innovation, right? And it's not just about innovation, but something which can. I just had a little chat with some of the students before, just to get the hang of how is it that you guys are looking at the topic. So the 3, 4, 5 people that I managed to talk to, and the sense that I got that most of you thought that sustainability was about longevity of an idea. How long can the idea last, and how far can it go, and how scalable is it? I would like to submit that it's a little more than that. Now, before I start, I would like to just give a caveat. There is a very nice line that I heard some time back from someone, that when an old and distinguished scientist tells you that something is possible, he is very probably right. But when an old and distinguished scientist tells you something is not possible, he is very probably wrong. So luckily, I'm neither old nor distinguished, so I can say whatever I like. And so I think let me first start by talking about generations that set us apart. Our generation, honestly, had it really easy. So I look at my father's generation. Theirs was a generation which had all kinds of restrictions, very little options, very, very little availability. Everything was a waiting list. Everything in life was a waiting list. Whether you wanted to get a telephone, or a scooter, or a bicycle even, there was a waiting list attached. It was an economy of shortages, where you had very few choices in life and very few options, and you made it with what you had. Our generation got really lucky that I think in our lifetime, opportunities opened up and how, and we suddenly had a whole world to choose from. We suddenly became global. We had an exposure to the world like our previous generation never had, and we were able to explore and kind of compete with the world and get us where we did. Your generation actually has, I'm sorry to break this news, but it has a very tough time ahead. A lot of you, the few of you that I spoke to, I think almost everyone almost compulsively spoke the word VUCA. And they said we are in a VUCA world, and that was the theme last year, and how you're all concerned about that. And your concerns are right. But I think I would like to say that there are 3 challenges that really your generation will face. And none of them are anything that we faced. Anything like that, of that magnitude, was faced by us. Two of them were highlighted by the Prime Minister as well. The Prime Minister talked about terror and climate change being the two biggest challenges facing the world today. And that is a reality. So I think, but I would like to add a third, a really huge challenge. It's a challenge and an opportunity, and it's up to you on how you take it. Is this entire concept of the second machine age, which is overtaking us. The second machine age or machine age 2.0, as some people call it, will suddenly make almost half the jobs that are available today redundant. Those jobs will be done by machines, and people won't need to do them anymore. Now that means that there are so many fewer jobs available in the market. And even the jobs that will exist will have changed so dramatically that I was just talking again to one of the girls that I was talking to in the morning, and I was telling her that your generation will probably have to retrain yourselves maybe 3 or 4 times in your lifetime, where everything that you know will be redundant at some point in time, and you'll have to just learn the new world all over again and restart. Press a control or delete and start again. And those are the challenges that I think are really, really substantial. On terror and terrorists, I think we are all forever, the people who work in security establishment are forever worried about when is it, and we seem to be palpably close to a terrorist someday acquiring a nuclear asset, and suddenly the world will be a very different place after that. And we are very, very close to that, right? And just escaping sometimes by a skin of our teeth and stuff like that. And the third thing is climate change, which is real and palpable. I think last 10 years in history have been the hottest years on record, and every year the temperatures are going up further and further. I remember reading when I was young, when I was probably younger than even what you are today. I remember reading then in the 70s, late 70s and early 80s, reading somewhere that if the temperatures, average temperature in the world rose by 2 degrees, then 30% of the world that we know will drown. So which will mean that all the, the glaciers will dissolve and become water, and that will raise the sea levels. So cities of Bombay, New York will be history, will be gone. And those challenges are real. Now, very often, as it often happens with these kinds of things, the doomsday scenarios don't always turn out true. There is something called human ingenuity. We always somehow seem to find the way. And now it's up to you guys and your generation to really take up the challenge and show your ingenuity in overcoming these problems. So machines, like I said, they will decimate good half of the jobs that exist today. You'll have to really scramble for what is left. And really machines will define the agenda in terms of how and what part is that is left for you to do. Because whatever machines can do more efficiently will definitely be passed on to the machines. And it's for you to discover and find how is it that you can be more, you can do things which the machines can't do. India, like Professor Dolokia again spoke about, we have been kings of innovation for centuries. I think we have, the Jugaad has been it's been part of us. And in most part, it has happened because it's our response to a non-responsive system. Because I had this guest from Germany who came down, and we'd put him up in a hotel which was 20 minutes away. And first day he came, it took him 45 minutes. But we told him the hotel is 20 minutes away, it took him 45 minutes. Next day, he came in 10 minutes. And so he couldn't understand. Now, that was a Saturday. So I didn't tell him the Saturday morning, sometimes the traffic is like that. And so he said, in our country, we have so much certainty that we guys don't innovate at all. And I mean, he stayed with us for almost 3-4 months. And after 3-4 months, this was his, that you guys are so innovative. Because in my country, if I go, I put on the switch, I expect the light to be there. When I start from home, I know that I'm going to reach my workplace at 10:23 and it will be 10:23 and no later. And when I put on a tap, I know the water will come out of it at the right temperature and at the right. Whereas in your country, everything. And he says so in the US, if you break a CFL bulb, you know what is the process for if you ever happen to break every CFL bulb has 5 grams of mercury, which is extremely poisonous. In the US, if you accidentally break a CFL bulb, you're supposed to call a special agency called HAZMAT, which is hazardous materials, get out of the house, seal the house. The agency will come, they will completely cordon off the area, they'll go in, they'll remove the dangerous substance called CFL bulb, In our case, people put in plastic bags and chuck it in a dustbin, and let it get into the groundwater or wherever it has to get to. Eventually, it'll come and hit us, and we'll find a solution to it then. Right now, the problem is not big enough to be found a solution for. So we always find, we do the jugaad for the next challenge that comes up, and we find our solution. But none of our innovations really become what they could become. I call it a Brahminical problem, which is, in our social structure that we have had for so many generations, the Brahmin is the master of knowledge, right? And the Brahmins are supposed to have it. And the Brahmin also is completely anti-money. In the traditional way, money is a poisonous substance that you have to keep away from. So money and knowledge don't interact together. The guys who have the money are not supposed to have the knowledge. The guys who have the knowledge are not supposed to have the money, right? And this is the problem. Steve Jobs could, for example, or a Bill Gates could design. Bill Gates could design a DOS system and also have the intelligence, which is a Brahminical thing to do, but also have the intelligence of Bania to say the copyright shall stay with me and make billions of dollars out of it. And eventually use the money the way he wants to use it, rather than letting someone else decide for him. Whereas in our plaza, guy who comes up with the knowledge, I mean, it's almost unfair of him to ask for money for an idea, right? Who asks for money for an idea? That's a Brahminical problem that we have. The society is overcoming that. And that's the other challenge that I think we'll have to fight some of the stereotype, typical mindsets. There are some stereotypical mindsets that we probably need going back to. And this is where I come to the second word, second important word that I talked about, sustainability in this thing. We Indians recycle everything, right? My mom and even my wife, she would recycle everything. All the gifts that came home, the gift paper, wrap paper got carefully unfolded. It was a 5-minute process because paper can't tear anywhere. Take it out carefully, fold it, keep it below the bed to be used later. Every single thing in the household got recycled. Raddi was never thrown. You always sell it to you make whatever little money you make out of it, right? Old furniture, of course, recycled. Sold it to somebody else who bought it again. Every gadget in the house was sold off. Nothing was just thrown away in the dustbin, right? You look at every single category, clothes, old clothes, either we went and gave it away in charity or we just gave it away to somebody. I would give it to charity or give it to younger cousins or whoever, but nothing ever got kind of just, we abhor, in our generation at least, or maybe the generation before us, they abhorred pure waste. So anything which was just purely wasted. In the US, there is a paper that I read that almost 47% of the grocery items that are bought are consigned to the dustbin without ever being opened. 47%. And the economy gets sustained on that. But it's such criminal, huge wastage that you buy 6 packs of cereal at a time, maybe use up 2 or 3 of them, and just throw away the remaining packets after some time because they've gone past the expiry date and life goes on. Whereas in India, we'd never do that, right? Now that's something that my wife does, but I can see my children do it a lot less. And that too, when you really force them to do, sometimes they would do it. And this is probably Indian frugal. So we are the most sustainable people on the planet. I was having lunch with some colleagues, and some very distinguished colleagues. Both of them are authors now. So I jocularly tell them कि आप तो दोनों पढ़े लिखे हो गए, हम तो सिर्फ पढ़े ही रह गए, because I have not written a book yet. So I felt really kind of marginalized in the group. So there's a colleague of mine called Damodar Mal, ex-colleague, and another ex-colleague called Prakash Iyer. They've both written books for in the respective industry. And we were just talking over lunch, and Prakash said something like, I wish we in India were a little more concerned about environment. And Damodar and me just piled on to him. He says, what do you mean? We are the most concerned about the environment. Yeah? सब कुछ recycle करते हैं हम. We don't waste anything. We just completely, we are the most green people in the world. How dare you say that we don't care about environment? No, but this is the thing that we are probably losing this. The sustainability aspect is as important as innovation. Innovation is important. Like Professor Dholakia said, last 200 years, it sustained us. It'll probably sustain us for another 200 years. But without sustainability coming into the equation, it will not. I think, and this is where I think uh, the word sustainability has, I looked for, when I got the topic, I combined the two words, sustainable innovation, and I tried to look for a definition on the internet. I went to the net to study the subject and topic a little more to see what has been written. I found a beautiful paper from UK which actually summarizes the last 70 seminars that have happened between 2013 and 2016. There are 70 different seminars across the globe that happen on the subject of sustainable innovation. It gives you a 70-page summary of what all kind of papers were presented. So they've given the number of papers. The 33 papers were presented in this area on government policy, 56 papers presented in marketing, blah, 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 all that and that. And some of the things that I read there were actually fascinating. First of all, even today, we don't have a definition for sustainable innovation. So it's still a very vague concept, because if you really look at it, sustainable innovation is an oxymoron. Because innovation is about breaking the boundaries and imagining the art of the possible. Sustainability about maintaining status quo in some manner, just making sure that you don't disturb things so much that you don't know what kind of problems might come up later. So I think these two combined gives us. However, there are innumerable number of papers, and the findings for some of those papers, or the conclusions for some of those papers, were really fascinating. You must read. In fact, if you just type sustainable innovation, you'll get this. Is probably second or third link from the top. It's a PDF file, a 70-page document. It's fascinating read. So it talks about challenges that sustainability will face in many areas. These are challenges on public policy side, challenges on the market and marketing side, challenges on the financing side. The fact is that when you make an idea sustainable, people don't realize that while it's a harder path to get to, but more often than not, it actually pays for itself. So it's an economically more viable thing. And some of the couple of trends that I've seen in the last few years makes me very hopeful that this is an area that we will lick, and your generation will have to do that, is that we'll really lick this problem and come on top of it. I think first is that competition and the competitive feedback as well as the customer feedback is pushing companies to devise strategies on sustenance. A lot of companies, Nike now has actually created an index within the organization on sustainability. They measure a lot of parameters, which includes carbon footprint of their products, which includes in production, in transport, and what are they giving back to the environment in return. So they've actually increasingly working on products which are more sustainable, sustainable from an environmental perspective. And a lot of companies, you'll find the example of Boots, Nike, a lot of companies have, in India too, a lot of companies have started focusing on the area of sustenance. And again, more selfishly so, because it also makes business sense. Because eventually, at some stage, you can start actually using this as a competitive advantage. If you look at what Patanjali today stands for, a lot of his appeal also comes from the fact that people assume that it is assumed. No one knows for sure, but you assume that is actually coming from natural, and from it's a far lower carbon footprint. It's a far more sustainable kind of product, and it feels good to use a product like that, right? And that is where we are seeing. So I think on the one hand, there are trends suggesting that companies are beginning to think about working in a more sustainable manner. And secondly, I'm seeing now that even from the consumer ends, a lot of consumers are veering towards using products which are more sustainable. And this is happening a lot. It's far more pronounced and spoken about. However, there is always a gap. People say that they want to use products which are sustainable, but they will not always do what they say. Right, customer? We call this the awareness gap. So you'll say that this is what you want to do, but you actually might do something else. But a lot of retailers, and we have also started this process, but a lot of retailers around the world, so Walmarts and Targets and Tesco's have started using and making, classifying products based on their sustainable footprint or their sustainability footprint. And this is something that I think customers understanding what it means to them, because last 7-8 years have really woken up people and said that yes, it was something that we talked about in theory, but it's not so anymore. This has come home now. These chickens are coming home to roost, and we need to do something about it, and something really fast. So in conclusion, I do hope that over the next 3 days, you'll get to discuss threadbare a lot of ideas revolving around innovation, but more around sustainable innovation, uh, which will impact the growth of the fledgling idea, that is sustainable innovation. I would also say that while importance of adopting sustainable innovation, it cannot be overstated, right? It's something that whose time has come, and there is a growing realization to this. Still, I think relatively few companies have started adopting it, and it's a long way to go. I'm not saying that this is panacea which will solve all our problems, but it's definitely a very, very good beginning to start addressing the three problems that I talked about, and I think that is something. So sustainable innovation coming as a cornerstone for the government policy, for society at large, and for markets is something that is really of essence here. And I think a lot of many new business opportunities will also emerge from this entire drive towards sustainability. I think new business ideas and opportunities will arise. Another thing that I have noticed, I've been going to campuses a lot. I was advising, I was mentoring a few kids at IIT, and what I see today is, I don't know about your batch, but how many of you plan to take up a job after finishing your course? How many of you plan to start up something on your own? There are very few actually, but if you go to, for example, when I go to IIT, any IIT classroom, and I ask this question, 50% of hands go up for, I'm going to do something on my own. Maybe it is what Professor Dholakia talked about, mistaken belief that innovation is basically what you do on the phone, right? Innovation is a lot more than that. But I think a lot of people are doing IT-based startups, but even others. I met two students who have this entire amazing business idea, and they're struggling for funding right now about recycling garbage from homes. So they want to almost privatize garbage collection and converting that into biogas, marketing that gas separately and the manure separately. And they want to do it he has an entire business plan ready. The guy is right now he's got some seed funding. He's looking for a big funding and maybe take up one city. So they've decided to take up a city like Bhopal, of the size of Bhopal, as a test case. And if you're able to do it there. Now this is I didn't expect this because when you talk to the IIT students, you'll all think they'll want to do something, they want to develop a new app, right? When they talk of doing a startup. But these are guys who these two kids who just want to work on this. And it's a fascinating job. They've gone and met ministers, policymakers, everybody appreciates the idea, but they are still struggling for funding. But so I think there remain many obstacles in the path of sustainable innovation. I think the system level obstacles, like I said, government policy, marketing, finance, and so on and so forth. But it may not be, like I said, the panacea that will solve all our problems. It will be a great beginning for a better future for all of us. And let's remember just this, that future is where we'll spend the rest of our lives. And with that, I would just like to say thank you.